I am so bad when it comes to series. This is probably the most dense book I own, which is weird. I can't even think of how long it's been. When was this book actually published? In 2015. Or, yes, there's quite a few copyright dates. Because we're entering 2023, I feel like at that point it probably is done. I probably could have also looked up to see what the author says. I guess I don't care that much. Ever since her mother's disappearance, oh my gosh, always, middle grade YA, they never have parents. The dedicated detectives who investigate these crimes are members of an elite squad known as the Sensitive Crimes Division. What is this, Law and Order? That just sounded like Law and Order SVU or something like that. These are their stories. Is this? What is going on? Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra, the TBR0. I hope to one day lessen my physical TBR until it finally hits 0.
We'll see if it actually happens.
I have been inspired by BookTube with Amy. For the last few months, she has been sprinkling in her content series-related themes, tasks, lists, and I finally decided that I need to enter that realm as well, especially because I am so bad when it comes to series. I either start them knowing that they're a series or not knowing them at all, and then deciding that that first book is a standalone in my mind. And so I'm trying to be better about that, and I have gone through my shelves. I love any task that forces me to reacquaint myself with the books on my shelves, and so I really liked this task, and I ended up finding 36 books that are the first in a series. Whether that series is completed or ongoing depends per book, but I'm really looking forward to talking about them. Hopefully that'll keep them fresh in my mind so that as I'm looking for a new book, whenever that comes, maybe I'll start picking up some of these series books. And who knows, maybe the series that you'll see on my list will inspire you to peruse your own shelves, or you're gonna see books that I own that you also own, or maybe there's gonna be a series that you've been dying to read, or you saw once, you haven't been able to find it anywhere, and suddenly seeing it on my channel will help you find it again. I just thought it would be really fun to list them and see what comes of this. Maybe I'll also do a video halfway through the year or at the end of the year comparing to see which of these books I actually did finally read. It'll be embarrassing if it ends up being none, but you know, one way to find out. So mainly I've discovered that I have fantasy series, I have middle grade series, and the rest are some subgenre under the mystery umbrella. So they might be cozy or modern, historical fiction, and the like. So I'm going to start with fantasy and then work my way through until I end with detective fiction. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Kill the Farm Boy. This is by Delilah S. Dawson and Kevin Hearn. It's so funny that I ended up finally finding the first book in this series because it has been on my radar for a while, mainly because the last time I was visiting my favorite independent bookstore, which is called Auto Bookstore. It is in Williamsport, PA, so if you're ever in Williamsport, check them out. I found the sequel. So they didn't have the first one in stock, they had the sequel, and it just looked so fun. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was very silly and fun, just like this one is. And it was giving me Dungeons and Dragons vibes, like fairy tale satire. And the last time I was visiting my home in Rochester, New York, I ended up stopping at that bookstore and they did happen to have the first one in common. So I did buy this back in December of 2022. Don't regret it. I just can't wait to finally read it. And to give you a little bit of a taste, once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, a hero, the chosen one, was born. And so begins every fairy tale ever told. This is not that fairy tale. There is a chosen one, but he is unlike anyone who has ever been chosen. And there is a faraway kingdom, but you have never been to a magical world quite like the land of Pel. And it goes on to just talking about the kind of craziness that these characters will experience. Apparently, every single main character is either a person of color or a part of the LGBT plus spectrum, which is awesome. And there is a very cool map for those who are fantasy lovers and love maps. I did a little bit of digging. It looks like this was published back in 2018, I think, and the series is called Tales of Pel. And I believe that 3 books so far have been published. I don't know if this is meant to be a trilogy. The last one was published around like 2019, 2020. So maybe there's more, maybe there isn't, but it just looks so fun. So I really do hope to read this soon. Next fantasy book that is on my list is The Fifth Season. So this is by N.K. Jemisin. This one has been on my shelf for years. I can't even think of how long it's been. When was this book actually published? In 2015. Or, yes, there's quite a few copyright dates. But I think that this book has been on my shelves for quite a few years because I was trying to get into fantasy, and I remember I looked up a list and this one was recommended to me, and I just haven't ever picked it up. I really want to, especially because I've heard only good things about this series, and it looks like it might be finished because the last book in the series was published in 2017. It was 3 books, and the series was called The Broken Earth. This is definitely high fantasy. Maybe that's why I haven't picked it up, because I'm always hesitant when it comes to high fantasy or epic fantasies. I am worried that I won't fully grasp the very complicated world building that happens when it comes to high fantasy. The back says, "A season of endings has begun. It starts with the Great Red Rift across the heart of the world's sole continent, spewing ash that blots out the sun. It starts with death, with a murdered son and a missing daughter. It starts with betrayal and long dormant wounds rising up to fester. This is the stillness, a land familiar with catastrophe, where the power of the earth is wielded as a weapon and where there is no mercy." So it seems really intense. Maybe it will be one of my chunky reads that I'm trying to put into my reading schedule, because I do tend to shy away from thick, chunky books, and I would view this as pretty chunky. So I don't know. Let me know if you've read it and if I really, really should be reading it sooner rather than later. Next on my fantasy series list is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This was 100% one of those TikTok, Instagram hyped up books that got me to finally buy it, and then I just proceeded to put it on my shelf. So it has been a couple years. I know that this series, I'm pretty sure, is done as well. It's called Folks of Air, which I had no idea. I guess I just kept thinking it would be called the Cruel Prince series. This has 3 finished books, and I suppose a couple like 0.5s, which I was kind of surprised. There are quite a few books on my shelves that have like either a prequel or a bunch of half series books, which I don't fully understand what that means. And the last book was published in 2020. So because we're entering 2023, I feel like at that point it probably is done. I probably could have also looked up to see what the author says. I guess I don't care that much, but it does seem like it'd be fun. I'm pretty sure it's categorized as like a YA fantasy, so you'd think it would be pretty quick to get through as well. We will see if I actually finally read it. I hope I do at some point, but I don't know, I've just not really been gravitating towards it ever since I actually purchased it. I am very embarrassed by the next one I'm going to mention, because this just shows how bad I am when it comes to series and understanding that they're on my radar. But the next one I'm going to talk about is by Haruki Murakami, and this book actually contains 2 books in one. It's pretty funky. There's Hear the Wind Sing, and then there's also Pinball 1973. These books are the first and second in what is the Rat series. The reason why I think that this is a perfect example of how stupid I am when it comes to series is that there's 4 books in the series, and I have read books 3 and 4, not knowing that this was the first. I feel so silly. I remember I just wanted to try Haruki Murakami, so I ended up reading A Wild Sheep Chase, which is book number 3. Didn't know that. I thought it was book number 1, and then I knew that the book after was called Dance, Dance, Dance. Loved both of them. Literally had no clue reading both of them that there were 2 stories that came beforehand until I saw someone posting about it. So I feel really silly that I read those 2 books years ago, many, many years ago at this point. And then just maybe a couple years ago, I picked this one up, and I haven't read it because, I don't know, I feel weird having read books 3 and 4, not having read 1 and 2, and it almost feels silly to go backwards, but I am determined. That's why it's on my shelf. And who knows, maybe it'll inspire me to pick up A Wild Sheep Chase and Dance, Dance, Dance as rereads or something. That could be really fun. And also, actually, that series ended in 1988. It's one of the weird series. Most of the books on my list here that I own happen to be much more newer releases. Many of them are either on the cusp of being completed or they've just recently been finished, whereas that one is one of the few that's obviously been done for quite a long time. The next one is actually a very new book that was added to my library because it was a part of my Christmas book haul, and that is Magic Steeped in Poison. This is by Judy I. Lin, and it is actually, I think, a YA fantasy, if we're going to be specific about it. The series name is like a book of tea series, I guess. It has had 2 books out thus far. The second book just came out in 2022, and I'm pretty sure I saw that on a list, and I don't know, I'm imagining I must have mentioned this title to my parents, and that's why my mom bought it for me for Christmas. I don't really remember doing that. I probably saw book 2, thought it looked great, and actually made sure that it was the first book in the series, realized it wasn't, and told her about this one. So really looking forward to it. I'm assuming that it's not a duology, so the series is ongoing, and it's just really gorgeous. This past year in 2022 was such a great year for YA fantasy for me, 2 things that I don't read very often. So I'm really hoping that 2023 is the same, and who knows, maybe this one will help me get there. This one you could probably categorize as a mystery technically as well, but because the fantastical elements are so forward in this particular book, I'm categorizing it as fantasy first, and that is A Study in Brimstone. This is the Warlock Holmes series. Obviously, you probably can tell that this is a spin-off from Sherlock Holmes, whereas instead of Sherlock Holmes, it's Warlock Holmes, so he is a warlock, and I love that. I absolutely adore the idea of parodies or spin-offs or like fantastical elements being applied to historical stories, like for instance what Pride and Prejudice and then Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, that kind of thing. That is my cup of tea. So for the Warlock Holmes series, 5 books have been published. The last one was published in 2020, so again, I feel like it's safe to say that it's probably done, but I don't know. I don't really know how long it takes for each book to have been written by the author. I mean, what's the Game of Thrones series, for instance, is a good example of, like, you know, books will be published years and years apart. Sherlock Holmes is an unparalleled genius who uses the gift of deduction and reason to solve the most vexing of crimes. Warlock Holmes, however, is not. He may be a font of arcane power, but frankly, he couldn't deduce his way out of a paper bag. The only things he's got going for him are the might of 1,000 demons, the spirit of Moriarty trapped in his head, and his stalwart companion, Dr. John Watson, who is always there to guide him through the treacherous shoals of Victorian propriety and save him from a gruesome death every now and again. I love it! I think it's going to be so funny. I can't imagine this not being hilarious, especially the idea of Moriarty being a spirit stuck inside his head. That just seems amazing. I don't know. Why has it taken me so long to read some of these? Again, this is why it's good to peruse your shelves and remind yourself of all the great reads you already own. And next, this one was, what to say? How do I speak? So I bought this not knowing that I'm pretty sure it's self-published or it's an independent publisher, but I can't really find the publisher's name. So I think that this author self-published, which is just awesome. Good for her. And I think it's a really successful series from what I can tell. And this is called Baking Bad. So it is a cozy mystery, and then in parentheses it says with dragons. The cozy mystery series itself is called Beaufort Scales. It seems so fun. I think I was inspired to buy this one because I recently read Magic Lies and Deadly Pies, and that one was so good. I'll put a thing up here because it's by Misha Pop, and book 2 is coming out in early 2023. I don't think it's been published just yet. So because I loved that so much, I love the idea of cozy mystery plus magic, I decided to grab this, and it's by Kim M. Watts. The series is ongoing, I think, because the 7th book just came out in 2022, and there's also a prequel, which I didn't know, but I'm totally fine with reading the first book in a series first. And you know, it's quite a big book, but it seems like it would be a quick read because it's cozy. Now we're moving more into my middle grade fantasy. So the first one I'll be talking about is Amari and the Night Brothers. Firstly, that cover is gorgeous. And this is by B.B. Alston. I know that this is a really, really popular series for a lot of people this past year and the year before, who I believe had the arc. They said that this was often either their favorite middle grade read in the entire year or their favorite read in general in the year. So obviously it's very exciting. It's really hyped up, which kind of makes me nervous, but at the same time, because so many people said they really just genuinely love it and the hype hasn't died down, I think that that's pretty accurate. The series name is Supernatural Investigations. Book 3 is scheduled to come out in 2023, and I believe book 2 just came out this summer or this fall. So again, people are adoring it, and I've been meaning to read it. It seems really fun. It's middle grade magic. It has a bi POC main character, of course. So there's no reason why I shouldn't be reading it. There is no reason why. So yeah. Next I have Green Glass House, and this is by Kate Milford. I am assuming that this has magic in it. That's why I'm putting this here, but I might be wrong. Maybe it's just a middle grade mystery because it is the winner of the Edgar Award for Best Juvenile Mysteries. I just assumed that it was kind of this magical something eerie, maybe supernatural. It's set in an inn, and the innkeeper's adoptive child, I believe, Milo, ends up just noticing some really shady characters are arriving at the inn during a time where it really should be a dead season. You know, they're set in winter. Clearly something is going on. And I think that there's also some type of like haunting, you know, it's like a rambling old house. So I don't know. And there are many books that came after this. It is, of course, called the Green Glass House series, and there's 5 so far. The last one was published in 2021. So I think that there may be more books in this series to come out. I think 2021 is recent enough that that's a possibility. I also realized that I have Dragon Mountain, and so this is by Katie and Kevin Sang, and they've had 5 books published so far in this series. It's called the Dragon Realm series. The most recent one came out in 2022, so just last year. And I don't just have the first book in this series. I have books 2 and 3. I don't know why I did this. I think what happened is that I was considering requesting book 4 from NetGalley because it just looked so fun. And so I dedicated myself, bought books 1, 2, and 3, and then I proceeded not to request book 4. So then I had no reason to actually read books 1 through 3, and so now they're just sitting on my shelf. So obviously I'm kind of in a conundrum. I really hope I like the series in general because I have all 3 books, and I really want to be starting this now because it's one of the few series where I do have at least book 2 readily available. Many of these books that I've already mentioned, I only happen to own book 1, so it does kind of seem silly to be considering them and then trying to find ways to procure the other books in the series when this is one of the few where I already could just keep going with it. So maybe I should be prioritizing this one. And who wouldn't love a middle grade with dragons? That is so cool. And it's at a camp. It's called Camp Dragon. I can't. What is happening in this book? This is another book that I bought from Auto Bookstore. Again, on my very few trips back to Rochester, I always have to stop at Auto, and periodically I will support that independent bookstore. So I ended up buying Pilar Ramirez and The Escape from Zafa. And this also is a very new released book. It just came out, I want to say actually in 2022 or late 2021, and the second book is scheduled to come out in 2023. The series is actually called Pilar Ramirez, so the main character, I'm assuming it must be her. She is so cool looking, and I feel like this is definitely going to be giving me either like Jurassic Park or Jumanji vibes. Like it just looks like it's in like a very kind of tropical place with a lot of mysterious animals. The back is very simple, and it says, "Speaking of things not making sense, let me bring it back to the day my whole life changed. I woke up one morning in Chicago and went to sleep that night on a magical island." Oh my gosh, it seems so fun! If I'm not reading a mystery, I am reading middle grade fantasy adventure. Moving from a very recently published book, a very new series to all of us, I actually am now going to be backtracking to one that apparently has been around for a while and is just new to me, and that is The Sisters Grimm. I love the idea of meshing genres together. It's by Michael Buckley, and the reason why this book got on my radar is mainly because I had so much fun reading A Tale Dark and Grim, which is the first book in that series as well, by Adam Gidwitz, I believe. I also read the second book in that series, so really proud of myself that I can actually reference a series that I have read more than one book in. And I own the third one, which is called The Grim Conclusion, but I haven't read that. And oh my gosh, I just want to, mainly so that I can say that I've actually finished a series, because like I said, it's just something I don't tend to do. So for this one, I believe there's like 9 books in the series. 9, yeah, so 9 books in the series. The most recent one that was published was 2012. It's obviously come to a conclusion, it's done. But with that said, I think I'm almost more hesitant to pick up books where the series is done, especially when I'm very aware of how many books there are that exist. Like 9 is quite a bit to feel dedicated to versus, for instance, Pilar Ramirez. Maybe there'll be 9 books overall in the series, but so far there's only 1 and then 1 on the way. So I feel like that's just more digestible for my brain versus this one that is complete. I know that it has an end. I'm a bit more intimidated knowing just how many books there are in that series. So maybe that's weird. Is that just me? If it's not and you feel similar, please let me know in the comments to make me feel better. Or also just give me any tips. What tips do you have when it comes to starting and completing series? Very much appreciated. I also happen to own the Book Wanderers. This is a part of the Pages & Co. series by Anna James. I believe in the UK, the first book is actually just called Pages & Co. And for whatever reason, the American booksellers decided to change the name so that, you know, Pages & Co. is just the series name, and then this book has its own title. Maybe they thought it would be confusing or whatever the case is. This one has 5 books so far in the series, and the most recent one came out in 2022. So again, this is definitely an ongoing series from what I can tell. I just love the idea of it being this magical series. I believe that these characters do enter books. Ever since her mother's disappearance, oh my gosh, always middle grade YA, they never have parents. 11-year-old Tilly Pages has found comfort in the stories at Pages & Co. Oh, her grandparents' bookshop. But when her favorite characters, Anne of Green Gables and Alice from Wonderland, start showing up at the shop, Tilly's adventures become very real. Not only can she follow Anne and Alice into their books, she discovers she can book wander into any story she chooses. Tilly's surprising new ability leads her to fun and exciting adventures, but danger may be lurking on the very next page. I have heard mixed things though. I've heard some people absolutely adore it. I've also heard some who found that nothing really pivotal happens, or, you know, there's no investment or huge kind of like serious drama that would make you feel super invested in the characters. We'll see how I feel. I really do love the whole concept of it. I love the idea of being able to enter books, as I said. So hopefully I enjoy it. And yeah, so this is yet another middle grade fantasy on my list. The final fantasy that I own, that is the first in a series, is The Hatmakers. This is another really nice book cover that I have, and it is by Tamsin Merchant. It's one of those books that doesn't have a dust cover or a dust sleeve. Instead, it's just like printed right on the book, which I don't know, I like that better. I tend to take off the dust jackets while I'm reading anyway. This is the first in a series of 2 so far, and it is called the Cordelia Hatmaker series. So Cordelia is the main character. The second book I believe is called The Map Makers, which also looks gorgeous and just magical and really fun, and that just came out in 2022, so you know that this series is just beginning. It seems like it's got its own world as well, so there will be world building, we'll be entering in a completely different society. It kind of reminds me almost like Brightstorm, this idea of many elements that resemble normal life, but then the author has altered something in some way that makes it very unique, and it's very clear that this is not the same society that we live in. The back says, the Cap worked a dark purple kind of magic, and who's the Cap? The captain? Maybe, because there's like all of these different ships and things. Anyway, she was asleep in the space of a single sigh. Tentacles beckoned her from the deep, and she called to her father, but her voice was lost among the shapes of waves. All night long, the words lost at sea, lost at sea, lost at sea, whispered in her in storm-tossed dreams, and an albatross keened and curled in a strange sky. In the morning, she woke with an idea. What is lost can be found. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't believe it. Maybe this is more adventuring. Maybe she leaves home. Honestly, I should probably know more than I do. But yeah, that's really cool. The Hatmakers. I am going to cover my cozy and modern mysteries next. I think that what I'm doing is I'm moving from priority, necessary first reads to those that really aren't that necessary, because with fantasy, with YA especially, with middle grade, any of those three categories, I think oftentimes you really do need to read the first book first, because either it's world building or there's some really serious adventures that are happening that only, get built upon when it comes to the second, third, fourth books in a series. So definitely the ones I just listed are very crucial to read first before I delve anywhere, unless, we're talking about Haruki Murakami again, and obviously I effed that up. The first one I'm going to talk about is Murder in the Mystery Suite, and this is by Ellery Adams. So I was really fortunate. I ended up joining some type of giveaway through Ellery Adams, through her account on Instagram, and I ended up winning the entire Murder in the Mystery Suite series, and that official series name is actually Book Retreat Mysteries. So if you're looking for it, that's where you'll find it. And the idea of mysteries being bookish, this is a biblio mystery series. I am all for it. And this series is actually ongoing, but it's quite long already. Like, I ended up being gifted, I think, the first 8 in the series, and number 9 is coming out in 2023. Yeah, so that's kind of crazy that obviously the series is very much loved. People are still buying it. Ellery Adams is obviously, in demand, so she's continuing to write it. And yeah, book 9 is coming out in 2023. I think it's like a hotel situation where each room is bookish, and this one happens to be the mystery suite where the murder happens. So I wanted to read it in 2022, didn't have the time. Maybe this year. Another series that is on my list that I'm pretty sure is finished is A Study in Charlotte. So this is by Brittany Cavallaro. It is a YA mystery series, which I didn't know when I purchased it. That in no way makes me less interested in it. I actually think it's really fascinating, because I remember when I was technically of the age range of YA, I didn't really know that there were mysteries in that age group, so I often read adult mysteries. So I'm really happy to see that these actually exist, and obviously they're super popular. The last book, that was the 4th book in the series, came out in 2019. That's why I'm pretty sure that it's already done. But this is another reimagining of what we know when it comes to Sherlock Holmes, in a sense. Charlotte Holmes, she, I believe, is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Sherlock Holmes, and of course we have a Watson descendant as well. This is set at like a preparatory school. I believe a romance is going to go on between these Watson and Holmes characters, which is just really fascinating to consider. It seems like just a lot of mysterious things happen at this academy, which is just great. I think that's a great setting. It's not one that's used very often, I think, in modern times. The most recent one I can think of is probably Truly Devious. Maybe it is popular in YA to have mysteries set in schools. What doesn't happen very often is college setting mysteries. That would be fascinating to kind of consider which ones of those exist. I was in a Sherlock Holmes phase, particularly adaptation phases, so that's why this is not the only one on the list. I've got Warlock Holmes, I've got this one, and I'm actually very certain I have at least one more on my shelf as well that's Holmes related. So I've had this next one on my shelf for years. I ended up buying it at a library book sale back when I was living in Rochester, and supported my local library, bought this book, and then did not read it. And that is Antipoldi and the Sicilian Lions. So this is the Antipoldi or Tante Poldi series, and it's by Mario Giordano. And what's really fascinating about this is that it is a translated series. I love that. I feel like we don't get translated work enough, especially in the mystery genre, particularly in modern mysteries. I think translations often are postponed decades and until they become kind of modern classics. But with this one, obviously it caught fire so quickly that they ended up translating it almost immediately. So there have been 5 books so far that were published. The last one was published in 2020, so I don't know. The chances that it could be coming out with a 6th one, maybe. I feel like with mysteries, usually it's once per year, so that's why I'm actually a bit more hesitant when it comes towards saying this one probably isn't finished yet. I think it probably is. I feel like I would love the setting, the idea of it being in Sicily or definitely in Italy for sure, and just the very warm, cozy kind of like tropical setting. I love island mysteries, so why wouldn't I like mysteries on this peninsula? I have really wanted to read this author because he's actually pretty much prolific at this point, and that's Alexander McCall Smith. This series, I think, is his most recent one, though, and it's definitely not done yet. It's The Department of Sensitive Crimes. I have another debut first book by him in a series that I'll get to later on in this particular list. For this one, I just kind of like the absurd cover. It seems a bit odd and curious. In the Swedish criminal justice system, certain cases are considered especially strange and difficult. In Malmo, the dedicated detectives who investigate these crimes are members of an elite squad known as the Sensitive Crimes Division. What is this, Law and Order? That just sounded like Law and Order SVU or something like that. These are their stories. Is this? What is going on? That is 100% taken from Law & Order. Do I need to investigate this more? It's giving me like parody vibes, similar to Carmen Maria Machado in Especially Heinous. Has anyone ever read her very long kind of novella-esque short story? That was my favorite in her collection for Her Body and Other Parties. Am I discovering that this is a Law & Order parody? I don't know. Obviously, I'm even more intrigued than I was when I first bought this book. Hopefully by this point you've realized that I just don't tend to look at books very seriously when I buy them. Apparently I don't even really tend to read the back of the book seriously enough, but I really hope to read it soon, especially because I feel like this is the year for me to return to absurd reads. I'm reading right now The Thing in the Snow by Sean Adams, and that is described as a satire meets psychological thriller, and it's very satirical and it's very fun and just weird. So I think that this might be my year that I'm getting back into those reads. For this particular series though, there are at least 3. I think that maybe the reason why I'm saying 3+ for this one in my notes is that maybe it has like 0.5s or like, some type of half reads, and the last one came out in 2021, so I would argue that, I don't know, maybe it is done, but maybe it's not. So excited about this one too. I honestly actually have to read this very soon, and that is The Highland Falcon Thief. This is a part of the Mysteries on Trains series, Adventures on Trains, but it's mostly mysteries if we're being honest. There have been 6 in the series so far. It's by M.G. Leonard and Sam Sedgman, dual writers. I love that. The last one came out in 2022, but I'm pretty sure that that's like the UK publication because I was approved for a NetGalley arc for the next one in 2023, and for whatever reason, a lot of times, like, if it comes out in the UK, it won't come out in the US for another year. It's really weird. I don't know why publishers do that, but because I ended up being accepted for that NetGalley arc, I really wanted to dip my toes into the series before I read one out of order, and so I ended up buying this one, I think from like Thrift Books or something like that, as like a used copy, because I wanted to try the first book first, and I have to definitely do that quickly soon because I can't remember when that NetGalley arc is going to be archived. I also have The Mysterious Benedict Society. The series name is the same as this first book. I guess it's now a Disney original series. I didn't really know that, but I knew that this was making its rounds on like social media and that, and it just looked so fun. And it's quite a hefty middle grade, ones that I don't tend to see very often, but they're always so detailed. Like, people don't realize that middle grades can have incredible world building societies and like plots, and that's what I think this one's probably going to be like. It has 4 books in the series, including a prequel, and the last one came out in 2019. So like, I'm imagining the series is done, but maybe it's not. Another fun kind of mystery but espionage-esque middle grade read that I have is City Spies. So this one is a part of, obviously, the City Spies mystery kind of series. There have been 4 so far, and actually I think the 4th one isn't officially out. It comes out in 2023, so this is 100% an ongoing series. It just seems so fun. I love the idea of these like spy kids traveling the world. Like, this one looks like it happens in Paris. On the back there's one that says Golden Gate, so it's definitely like a traveling kind of spy ring situation. The operating base is in Scotland, and then there's also mention of New York City as well, so I don't really know. Maybe there's a lot of traveling in this particular one. I did tell you that I had another Alexander McCall Smith on my list for first in a series, and here it is. It is the #1 ladies detective agency. This one I think has so many books in that series already made. Yeah, 23. That is insane. This book is also the name of the series, and yeah, 23 books so far. Last one was published in 2022. I have no idea if that was the last one, but you would think that after 23, it'd be like, okay, let's hang our hat and focus on something else. This one seems really fun. It's interesting because this author seems to always set his books elsewhere. Like the last one I mentioned was set in Sweden. This one's mentioned, like apparently it's in Botswana. It's like Miss Marple, but in Botswana. That's literally what it says on the back of the book. So I feel like it's definitely cozy, very modern, but also like a traveling kind of mystery, which is always fun. I think it's funny that you can see that I'm slowly taking these books off my shelves. So I'm moving into historical fiction mysteries. This is a really good example of a series, or like of a genre among series, that you don't necessarily have to read them in that series order. I think that historical fiction, like detective fiction, is often switched around. Even though it might be nice to get to know the character first in that first book, usually you don't really need to know anything that's happened previously. There's no like overarching, conflict that we're trying to get through. It's just that particular mystery, crime, murder, whatever it ends up being. This is a great example because I did read book 6 in this particular series first because it was a Christmas setting and it was Christmas time, and that series is Her Royal Spyness. So the first book has the same name as the series itself. It's by Rhys Bowen, and this is a really fascinating one. It is occurring during the 1930s in England, and the main character, she is 34th in line for the crown. Obviously that's significant, but at the same time, the joke of it is that she's 34th, so she's like, there's no way that I am ever gonna actually become queen unless something crazy happens. This series has been going on for a really long time. I don't really know when this first book came out, but there are 16 books in the series, and that counts like 0.5s or 0.5. The most recent book came out in like 2022, I think. Yeah. So like this series is ongoing, even though it already has so many books in the series. I picked this particular book up for free. I think it was like on the free shelf or an honor book series shelf, and so I mean, once I've read it, if I want, I could probably return it to the library and let someone else just take it for free. But it does seem like a really fun series. I really enjoyed the setup when I read the Christmas one, and actually certain events happened in it that do make me want to go back and see how certain things started, particularly the romance in this one. So yeah, I really think that it's a perfect example of a very fun, cozy historical fiction mystery. Many years ago, I picked this up on a whim, and that is The Mitford Murders. This is by Jessica Fellows. There are 6 in the series so far. It came out in 2022, the 6th one. So again, it's an ongoing series, and just the cover looks so fun. I love the idea of it being in this cozy, I'm assuming, British suburb. Yeah, so it says it's 1920 and 18-year-old Louisa Cannon dreams of escaping her life of poverty in London. So this is very much different from the idea of Her Royal Spyness, because while the main character in that particular book, Georgie, she is also dealing with certain kind of financial situation problems. She clearly is also viewed as kind of the upper echelon of society, whereas this one clearly is focused on her making her way in the world, probably trying to make money where she can, and maybe she falls into solving mysteries. This is a thick one. What I've realized is that historical fictions tend to be quite chunky slow burns, which I actually really adore, but I haven't happened to pick this one up, and I don't know, I've been meaning to. I've been meaning to read more historical fiction mysteries in 2022. That didn't really happen, so who knows, maybe in 2023. I told you there would be another Sherlock Holmes readaptation, reimagining, and that is this one, The Daughter of Sherlock Holmes by Leonard Goldberg. This one is set in 1914, so it's like obviously accurate when it comes to age, how this would be the daughter of Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes was, solving crimes in the 80s, 90s of the 19th century and on. I think actually one of the last stories published with Sherlock Holmes was in the 20s. So that's kind of, fun food for thought. With this particular series, though, it is probably ongoing. The series name is the same as this particular first title, so the Daughter of Sherlock Holmes series. And this is another one that has 6 books so far, and it was published in 2022. Really recent. The series is obviously popular enough to keep going. I am just a sucker for women's sleuths when it comes to early 20th century, 19th century kind of society, because usually they have to be so creative to, you know, show their prowess, their intelligence, and their ability to kind of like reveal the murderer while also abiding by like very restrictive gender roles. So it's always interesting to figure out how an author does that. And I'm interested especially because this author is a male author, and I don't know, I feel like that would be fascinating to see how he would view her ability to like move around in the world. I bought this as a pre-order, proceeded to put it on my shelf, didn't read it, and now I believe the 3rd book in the series just came out, and I'm talking about Pride and Premeditation. This is a Jane Austen mystery series. You'd think that this would be right up my alley, that I would love to read it. I think that I just ended up deciding to wait because I wanted to read more in the Jane Austen canon, and because I don't read classics very often, I just never got to it. And now I believe that there is a version of Sense and Sensibility, and I can't remember what the 3rd one is that came out. I love the idea of Jane Austen mixed with murder. It's really funny. I've had this book on my shelf for years, and this past year I ended up reading The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. Adored it. That was so good. I hope that becomes a series because I am so invested in the particular sleuths in that book. But who knows, it might have been a one-off. Did I start this already? Maybe I started it once. I don't know. I'm just blubbering at this point because I've gone through so many books in one video and I'm not used to doing that. So 2022 ended up being a year of many firsts, and one of those firsts happened to be my winning of a physical copy in a Goodreads giveaway. That copy ended up being Vanessa Riley's Murder in Westminster, and this is the first in a brand new series. It's going to be called the Lady Worthing series, so I'm imagining that's the main character. Vanessa Riley is already proven herself as like a phenomenal writer because she wrote Island Queens. She also had a book that recently came out that was kind of like a sequel to Island Queens, and I haven't read those books, but they look so good. So like I feel like the fact that she is a diverse author who can kind of like put her hand in different types of genres and still come out with a very successful book, that in itself proves that like she's really high quality. I just haven't gotten to it because it's a free book. I like was kind of obligated, I guess. Like I remember Goodreads sent me like a weird email saying, hey, remember when you won this? Like you need to, like, what did you think of it? Like you should really like plan to share about it. And I'm like, I will, like, calm down. I gotta read it first. And I already have all these other books. So really excited to read it. I think book 2 has already been scheduled. No, I don't even have any stats for that, but it does say it's the first in the series. So, I mean, I'm imagining book 2 is inevitable. See, this is another one of those books that I was 100% reeled by the cover, and not just this one, but the entire series. I saw this book at Otto Bookstore, one of my favorite bookstores that I've already mentioned a couple times in this video, and they often had like quite a few books in this series to be, you know, displayed, and it's just, I really like the darker tones. I feel like it seems like really like classic. The typeface just reeled me in, and what's even fascinating is I believe it's like post World War II, maybe. It says it's been a long war and Lane Winslow wants a fresh start. Young, weary, and haunted by countless wartime secrets, the ex-intelligence officer leaves London and settles into a secluded and sleepy hamlet in the mountains. Determined to conceal her past, she makes a happy home for herself among her eclectic neighbors. But when a corpse is discovered carrying nothing more than Winslow's name on a slip of paper, she fears she may not have escaped London unscathed. As the investigation threatens to expose her past, the real killer lurks dangerously close. So yeah, this is the first case in this particular series. It's compared to Maisie Dobbs and Bess Crawford, other heroines that are in the historical fiction mystery community. And this book is the first of at the moment 10 books in the series, and the 10th one is scheduled for 2023 as a publication. It's the Lane Winslow series. Again, it's very chunky. It's a chunky historical fiction mystery, right up my alley. I couldn't help it. I had to buy it. So I did buy it during one of my trips to Rochester this past year. So I broke my rule, bought a book, and then proceeded not to read it immediately. So I don't know, maybe I'll finally read it in 2023. We're starting to get into the kind of dark, spooky covers. The next one on my list is Murder on Black Swan Lane. This is by Andrea Penrose. And this is another series that I believe has kind of been going on for a while. It is the Rexford and Sloane mystery series. There are 7 so far being published, and the most recent one was in 2022. So like, there's no reason for us not to think that this series is ongoing, unless, you know, that was the kind of wrap up book, but I haven't heard anything. This just looks so cool. It's definitely giving us Sherlock Holmes vibes. I want to say it's 19th century as well, just like with the way he dresses. I would say it's probably set in the 19th century. I don't know. It seemed really interesting. It is one that's been on my shelf forever though. Like for a very long time. I can't even remember. I think I just wanted to like pick up a few books at a bookstore once, and this was one of them, and then I just never looked at it again. But I have my eye on it. I know it exists, so there we go. Taking a dip into middle grade mysteries for a second again, particularly a historical fiction middle grade mystery, I also own Murder Most Unladylike. This is the first book in the series Murder Most Unladylike. It's by Robin Stevens. Weirdly, I have like a sprayed edge copy, and I like bought this online and it just came as that way. I have the second book in the series as well. I think it's like Arsenic for Tea. Yeah, and that also is spray edged, so I don't really know. I know that I did buy particularly the British version because I think I like the covers better, and I just liked the titles because I think they changed the titles for the middle grade versions. I have no idea why they do that sometimes. This is another rare example of the fact that I don't just own the first book, but I own at least the second book, so you'd think I would prioritize it, or maybe I should. This seems really fun because the author is someone who has been a guest on She Done It, which is a podcast I work for. She seems like a really fascinating person, so I feel like I really appreciate her like as a person. I just need to actually finally read books that she's written. And this seems really fun. It seems like it's reminiscent of like Agatha Christie and many of the greats when it comes to like Queens of Crime or Golden Age detective fiction. It says, when Daisy Wells and Hazel Wong set up a secret detective agency at Deep Dean School for Girls, they struggle to find any real crimes to investigate. Then Hazel discovers the body of Miss Bell, and when she and Daisy return 5 minutes later, the body has disappeared. Not only do they have a murder to solve, they must prove one happened in the first place. I love a disappearing corpse trope. That is so fun. And yeah, so like this seems like it's going to be a winner, and like a fast read too, because it's middle grade. Finally, the last book on my historical fiction mysteries series is Pignon Scorpion, I'm assuming it's French, and The Barbershop Detective. This is by Rick Bleiweiss, and this is a relatively new series as well. The second one is just coming out in 2023. I bought this as like a second-hand copy at the Barnes & Noble from my hometown, or like near my hometown. Weirdly enough, they have like a used book section. It's the only Barnes & Noble I've ever seen do that, and so I ended up buying it, and it was in really nice condition. Strangely, it's super dense. Like, this is probably the most dense book I own, which is weird. I think it's set in like 1910. Yeah, the year is 1910 in like an English municipality of Haxford, so it's definitely like small, kind of like cozy town atmosphere. It says that it's for fans of Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot, and just it feels like a really feel-good, cozy historical fiction mystery. And like the cover is very detailed in like a fun kind of pop arty way. So yeah, another new series that I should be starting soon if I kind of want to keep up with the publication dates. I am so glad that this video is almost over. Anyway, my final section is detective fiction, specifically Golden Age. This, I think, is the subgenre that definitely does not necessitate the idea of like reading the first book, because like it just doesn't happen. A few of these one of these I've already read, another book in the series. All the other ones would actually be new to me, which is kind of interesting. We've got The Hanjin Murders. This is by Seshi Yokomizo, and this is a translation from like the Japanese Golden Age period. It's really interesting because the detective is actually the name of the series, and that's Detective Kosuke Kindaichi. I'm not sure if it's Kindaichi or Kindaichi because I don't really know how to pronounce, you know, this name other than like phonetically in English, which I know is typically wrong. When I was trying to figure out how many books are actually published here, I think the confusing part is that obviously not all books have been translated that are written by this author, but apparently the detective goes through 77 cases. This was published in 1946, and the cases go up till like 1980 or something like that, so like a really long history. Obviously the series has been completed, but I just find it fascinating that we are dependent on publishers actually translating these mysteries so that the English-speaking world can consume them. So a few of the next books that I'll be mentioning are all going to look a bit the same, and that's because they're all a part of the Penzler Presents Classic American Mysteries series, and that's because I'm a subscriber to them. Some of these I also picked up on my own when I would just kind of find them for a good price. The first one I'm mentioning is Miss Pinkerton by Mary Roberts Reinhardt. She's often described as like the American Agatha Christie. I've met some people who agree with that, other people who don't, so I really should just wait to see for myself what I think. This is actually a Hilda Adams mystery. So Hilda Adams is, I'm guessing, the main character who ends up investigating these crimes, and Miss Pinkerton must... Oh, Miss Pinkerton. So from what I can remember, the Pinkertons, they were like among the first kind of detective agency that ever existed, at least in the United States, back in like the 19th century. There was one scandal where actually Abraham Lincoln, there was an assassination attempt early on before he even became president, and the Pinkertons were those who like protected him and saved him from that, and then he ended up going on and becoming president, and then unfortunately, you know, a couple years later he ended up getting assassinated anyway by someone else. Yeah, so that's really interesting. I wonder if that's connected. It does say somewhere here, it says he calls her Miss Pinkerton after the famous detective agency. So, oh, very interesting. So this is like a call to that era, but this isn't obviously happening during that time. It's happening in the 20th century. Really interesting. Okay, my interest has peaked. Oh, also, there were only 4 books published in this series apparently, and the last one was in 1942. She did also publish different standalone or series novels as well, not just these 4 featuring Hilda Adams. So just, you know, it's something I should probably look into more. Next, I have The Cape Cod Mystery by Phoebe Atwood Taylor. This one was on my TBR probably a couple times last year, and I really had the intention of reading it. I think I just got overwhelmed sometimes with my TBR, and that's why coming in 2023, I will be mood reading more, just because those ended up being my most successful months because I was reading based on mood, not like forcing myself. And I just think that that actually is like better for me and better for the books, because now I'm like putting my best foot forward with them rather than being like, you're an assignment that I have to read. This is a part of the AZ Mayo series, and I don't think I even realized the last few times that I've mentioned this that it is the first in a series. So with this one, very different from Hilda Adams, it had 24 books in the series. That is so many, and the last one was in 1951. So imagine when this author got started. Apparently like the mysteries are happening in like the 30s and 40s, and this particular book first came out in 1931. So 24 books in like 20 years. That is insane. So the next one is The Benson Murder Case, and this is by S.S. Van Dyne. This is a part of the Philo Vance series, which, I don't know, Philo Vance, you can just tell that that is like part of a particular time period. I love the name Philo. I feel like that's really interesting. I don't know if it's short for something. My own experience with this particular author isn't actually in book form. I watched the Kennel Club Murder Case, or the Kennel Murder, whatever the movie's called, and that came out back in 1933. So like that in itself is already 90 years old to this year, which is really fascinating. This particular book came out in 1926. So imagine that this author was already continuing to publish. They'd only been publishing for like a few years, and they already were getting movie deals. I know that happens all the time nowadays, but it's just really fascinating to think about how that was happening like some 100 years ago as well. Actually, this ended up being a part of 12 books in the series, obviously this one being the first. So kind of more middle ground compared to the very few by Mary Roberts Reinhardt and the very many by Phoebe Atwood Taylor. The last one came out in 1939. So like this guy was writing for like 13 years and then he just stopped, at least in regards to creating mysteries for Philo Vance in like the novel long form work. My final book to discuss in this video is going to be Hag's Nook. This is by John Dixon Carr. It is the first in the Dr. Gideon Fell mystery series. I really enjoyed my first experience with this book, and this is a great additional example of the fact that you don't have to read these books in order. I just like to if I have it. I read The Eight of Swords earlier in 2022 actually, and I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. It was really absurd. I hear that he is like great at impossible crimes. The book that I read was impossible crime related, and I think that most of the books he published would fall under that kind of trope category. In this series, there are 13 total, and the last one came out in 1967. So out of my, 5 debut novels for like series by Golden Age detective fiction writers, John Dixon Carr apparently stuck to his series the longest. With that said, I don't know when he started writing this series. It came out in 1933. So yeah, really interesting. So that means like over the course of almost 35 years, he wrote 13 books following Dr. Gideon Fell. With that said, he did have other projects from what I can remember, but it's just interesting to kind of consider how quickly some people were publishing things and then how some people weren't. I mean, I'm still baffled by Phoebe Atwood Taylor writing like 24 books in 20 years. That is insane to think about. And this is actually a really cool edition of Hag's Nook as well that I kind of just found. I don't really know. I guess the publisher is Polygon. I've never heard of that, but happy to support them. Yay, finished! I understand why it's taken me so long to start doing series content because it is taxing. I really am glad I did it though, knowing that I have 36 first books in obviously 36 series is just amazing to think about. I had no idea. That just goes to show you that as we're collecting books and like finding books that we're interested in, like when you really sit back and start to kind of look at them, like you can see them from millions of different angles. And I'm really glad now that I did take the time to research this so that moving forward, maybe I will try to prioritize them. I mean, there's still some issues surrounding my ability to read series and complete them, but I feel like obviously the first thing you have to do is read book 1 before you can move forward, and this now provides me with that opportunity now that I've kind of looked into every single one, and literally there is not one that I'm not interested in reading in, which is really exciting to know. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you found series that you're interested in or series that you already own and now you suddenly want to read them. And yeah, let me know in the comments what series are on your priority for 2023. Give me suggestions on where to start. That sounds great. And if you enjoyed yourself, like the video, consider subscribing, ring the bell, all that jazz. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye!